Think about the last time someone lied straight to your face. Your jaw tightened, your fists curled up without you even telling them to. Every part of you wanted to call them out right there and say, "I know you're lying." It feels like the right move in the moment. But here's what almost nobody tells you. The second those words leave your mouth, you've just handed that person something valuable for free. Now they know exactly what you know, and a cornered liar doesn't crumble into guilt. They get sharp fast. They start rewriting the timeline in real time, twisting details and making you question your own memory. Some of them are so practiced at this that within a few minutes, somehow you're the one apologizing, and you're still not sure how that happened. But there's a completely different way to handle this. A quieter way, where your voice never rises, and your finger never points, and by the end of it, you know absolutely everything, while they never even see it coming. Today I'm going to break down exactly how that works in 3 simple parts using plain language anyone can use. Stick around because once this clicks, you will never handle a lie the same way again. Let's start with why yelling almost never works, and it actually comes down to something you already understand without realizing it. Picture a turtle. When a turtle senses danger, it doesn't fight back. It just disappears into its shell, completely sealed off. And once it's in there, you're stuck. You can knock on that shell all day. You can beg it to come out. You can even yell at it, and all you get back is silence, or maybe a half-hearted excuse from somewhere deep inside. But turtles don't hide because they're being difficult. They hide because they feel threatened. The instant a turtle feels safe again, its head slides right back out, and it starts moving around like nothing ever happened. That right there is basically the whole secret to this entire method. A person who feels safe gets careless. A person who feels hunted gets careful fast. So the real move isn't cornering them, it's making them feel so at ease that they walk themselves right out of that shell and hand you the truth without even meaning to. The first part of this method I like to call the open door, because that's really what you're doing here. You're not slamming a door shut on them by accusing them. You're leaving one wide open and inviting them to keep walking through it. When somebody lies to you, your gut wants you to narrow your eyes and stiffen up and look suspicious. Fight that instinct completely. Loosen your face instead and lean in a little the way you would if a friend was telling you something genuinely interesting. Then just keep the door open. Ask what happened next. Ask how that even played out. Nothing sharp and nothing loaded, just curious. Here's why that little move does so much damage to a lie. Think of a lie like an inflatable raft with a slow leak already in it. It looks fine sitting still, but the second someone has to keep adding air to keep it floating, cracks start showing up everywhere. Every extra detail a liar adds to sound more believable is one more soft spot in that raft. When you respond with curiosity, instead of suspicion, you're not getting played, you're simply giving them enough room to keep inflating something that was never going to hold air in the first place. They'll walk away thinking they got past you clean, while really they just built you a longer list of things that won't add up later. The second part I call the mirror, and this is where things get quietly powerful. Once they've finished telling their story, you hand it back to them calmly, like you're simply making sure you followed along. You're not trying to sound like a detective here, you're trying to sound like someone who's just paying attention. You confirm the timeline and the people involved, and the small details, all delivered in a completely relaxed tone. Here's the part that matters most though. You're not just repeating words back for fun. You're getting them to personally agree to every detail of their own story, and the moment they nod or say yeah, that's right, they've sealed themselves into it. There's no room left for "that's not what I said," or "you must have misunderstood me" days later. They confirmed it themselves in their own voice, while feeling completely comfortable and unbothered. You didn't force anything, you just held the mirror up and they walked right into it. The third and final part I call the quiet drop, because that's exactly what it feels like when it happens. No noise and no confrontation, just a small calm fact placed exactly where it needs to be. This part might come hours later, or it might come days later, once you've actually confirmed the truth through whatever means you have: a receipt, a message, a timestamp, or someone who was actually there. When that moment comes, you don't raise your voice. You don't launch into a speech about how you knew all along. You simply mention the real fact casually, almost like an afterthought, and then move the conversation somewhere else entirely. You might mention you happen to see something that confirms exactly where they were, and then immediately change the subject to something totally unrelated like dinner plans or weekend stuff. That shift matters, because it tells them you're not here to fight, you're just aware. And that awareness delivered without anger is far more unsettling to someone who lied to you than any amount of yelling could ever be. Because here's what's happening on their end, in that exact moment. It clicks. They realize you knew this entire time. You let them talk and you let them confirm every detail themselves, and you never once had to raise your voice to prove any of it. That's real control. Not the loud kind, but the kind that doesn't need volume to be felt. Let's talk about why this actually works on a brain level, because it's genuinely interesting once you break it down. When someone lies, their brain is running multiple processes at once. It's holding on to the real version of events somewhere in the background, while managing the fake version they're telling out loud, and simultaneously reading your face and tone to see if you're buying it. That's a lot of mental juggling, and it's exhausting even when the person doing it doesn't consciously notice how tired it's making them. The moment they believe they've successfully gotten past you, all of that mental effort just switches off. Their guard drops completely, and a mind that's no longer guarding itself gets careless. That's precisely the window where details start slipping loose, one small piece at a time, without them ever realizing they're handing you exactly what you need. Now flip the whole scenario. Imagine catching the lie instantly, and snapping back with something like, "That's not true, I know you're lying." In that exact second, their brain flips into full defense mode, the same basic reaction as being startled by something loud and sudden. Heart rate spikes and muscles tense, and the whole body braces for impact, except this time, they're not protecting themselves physically, they're protecting the story. And a defensive brain doesn't produce truth ever. It produces excuses, and it produces blame, and sometimes it produces confusion, deliberately designed to make you start second-guessing your own memory. You know that feeling where you start a conversation, completely certain you're right, and somehow 20 minutes later you're the one apologizing? That's defense mode working exactly as intended. Staying calm the first time around isn't just the polite choice here, it's genuinely the smarter one. Let's run through this with a real scenario so all three parts click together properly. Say a friend tells you they couldn't make it out one night because they were stuck at work late. Later, completely by accident, you find out they were actually at a party you weren't even invited to. The old instinct is to confront immediately. Something like, "I know you weren't at work, someone told me they saw you at that party. Watch what happens next." They panic. Maybe they insist you've got it wrong, or claim it was a totally different event on a different night. Maybe somehow within minutes, you're the one being accused of overreacting. The whole conversation stops being about the lie, and starts being about you, and just like that you've lost even if technically you were right the entire time. Now the quieter version. Open door first. You ask what time they finally got out of work, and sound genuinely interested. They relax, and because they think they're in the clear, they add more detail than they need, to maybe a name or a specific time. Little pieces they didn't have to give you. Then the mirror later in that same conversation, or even the next day you repeat the details back casually, just confirming you've got the story straight. They agree, and now it's locked in their own words. Then days later, completely unbothered, the quiet drop happens. You mention you happened to see photos from that party, and that it looked like a lot of fun, and you wish you could have come too. No accusation anywhere in that sentence, and no raised eyebrow, just truth sitting there in plain sight. And in that exact second, they know that you know. You never had to fight for a single piece of it. This same pattern works just as well outside relationships too. Think about a workplace version of this. Say a coworker tells your manager they finished a report on time, and you happen to know that's not true, because you were the one waiting on it. The loud move would be pointing that out in the meeting right there in front of everyone, and it feels satisfying for about 4 seconds. But now you've made an enemy, and worse, you've made someone defensive who has every reason to cover their tracks even harder next time. The quiet version looks completely different. You let the moment pass. Later one-on-one you ask something simple like how the report ended up coming together, and sound genuinely curious. They talk and maybe over-explain a little, because they think they're in the clear with you. You nod along, and maybe even repeat back a detail just to confirm you're following. Then later when it actually matters, when there's a real record of when that report was actually submitted, you don't make a scene. You just quietly make sure the right person sees the timestamp, calm and professional, with no drama attached. The truth does the talking, and you never once had to raise your voice or come across as the difficult one in the room. Now, let's talk about a few mistakes people make when they try this for the first time, because they're worth knowing before you try it yourself. The biggest one is impatience. People nail the open door part and get all the extra details, and then rush straight to the quiet drop without ever doing the mirror step in between. That's a mistake because without locking the story in first, the other person still has wiggle room to claim you misunderstood them later. The mirror step is what removes their exit door, and skipping it means you've basically built half a trap. The second mistake is tone. If your voice sounds even slightly smug or sarcastic while you're asking those curious questions, people pick up on it almost instantly, even if they can't consciously explain why. The whole method depends on genuine sounding warmth, and if you can't fake curiosity convincingly, this won't work, because their guard simply won't drop. And the third mistake, and probably the most common one, is caving too early. People get to the quiet drop moment, with the truth sitting right there, and then nerves take over, and they either soften the facts so much it barely lands, or they can't resist adding a little jab at the end, like so, "I guess you were lying, huh?" Don't do that. The second you add that jab, you've turned a calm, undeniable moment back into an argument, and handed back every ounce of leverage you spent all that time building. One important thing before we wrap up. This method isn't meant for tiny harmless slip-ups. It's not for someone who forgot to mention something small, or felt a little embarrassed about an honest mistake. Save this for the real situations, the repeated lies, the patterns, the moments where somebody is genuinely trying to control a narrative at your expense. Use it with intention, and not just because you technically can. So here's the whole thing wrapped up simply. Open the door and let them talk. Hold up the mirror and let them confirm it themselves. Then later make the quiet drop and walk away without ever raising your voice. 3 moves and 0 yelling required anywhere in the process. And here's something most people don't expect from handling things this way consistently. Something genuinely shifts in how people see you over time. They start to sense that you notice things, and that you don't panic, and you don't chase people down demanding honesty. And strangely enough, that tends to make people trust you more, and lie to you far less, because on some level, they sense that lying to you simply doesn't work the same way it works on everyone else. You become someone who's genuinely difficult to fool. Not because you walk around suspicious of the entire world, but because you actually understand how people behave under pressure and comfort alike. That's a fundamentally different kind of power than anything loud could ever give you. It's calmer, and it's quieter, and it tends to last a whole lot longer than any argument ever could. So next time someone lies straight to your face, think about the turtle. It only pulls into its shell when it feels hunted, so don't hunt it. Relax your shoulders and stay curious, and let it talk. And when the timing is actually right, let the truth speak entirely for itself. You don't need to win the moment, you need to win the pattern, and now you know exactly how that's done. If this shifted how you're going to handle the next lie someone tells you, go ahead and subscribe. Stay calm, stay sharp, and never let anyone outplay your patience.